Welcome to another video from Lockdown Electronics with me, Bill, and this time we're going to take another look at the µBITX HF transceiver, QRP transceiver. Now you may recall from video number 59 that I had a general look at this kit, how it went together, and I did say at the time that I'd made some modifications to it which were going to be the subject of a future video, and here is that video. There's two modifications I've done in particular. One regards the updating of the display, and the other one is the fitting of an S meter. There are some other mods, well, there's plenty of mods available actually. It's an ideal radio for that kind of thing. But we're going to look at those two mods in some detail today, and hopefully you'll be able to see exactly what I've done and how it's helped the performance of the transceiver. So let's start by looking at what I've done from a technical point of view, and then we'll look at the practicalities. Here then is the block diagram of the µBITX, and essentially it's in two parts. The part in the blue box is the main board, and the part in the sort of the reddy browny box is the Arduino, and they are actually two separate circuit boards connected by a multi-pin plug, as we'll see in a moment or two. So the two upgrades I've done are first of all to do with the display. So we've installed a new Nextion display. I've updated the firmware on the microcontroller using the software produced by KD8CEC. It's the version 1.2 software. Very impressive it is too. Thank you to KD8CEC for his work there. And then once that's done, you then need to make just a few calibration adjustments to the settings on the Arduino, and you do that using the µBITX manager. The second mod I've done is the S meter, and to do that requires building a very simple circuit board for the S meter driver. The S meter driver takes its input from the main board, just a single wire, and the output is fed into one of the pins on the Arduino via the Arduino board. And then again, once you've got that up and running, you need to do a little bit of calibration using the µBITX manager. Okay, let's start by having a look at the practicalities of the Nextion display and its installation. Well, let's start by looking at the front of the µBITX, and in particular the Nextion display, and it fits in exactly the same place as the original display. There's a few internal modifications I've had to make which I'll go through in a moment or two, but you've got the same touch screen. You've got various things on here, attenuation, you've got an IF filter where if you choose to pick up on the IFS, you can actually move the passband of the filter about. You've also got attenuation here, you can adjust. Point to note here is I've actually not got an antenna plugged in at the minute, but that's the signal strength meter, which is also another modification I've done, and again I'll talk through the details of that later on. But it's a really nice display. You can step up through the bands, step back down. What's quite nice, there's all sorts of things you can do on here. There's also the ability to store a number of frequencies in memory. I've got quite a lot of the 60 meter spot frequencies in here, and by simply tapping on there and returning home, it'll take you straight to the frequency that you've stored, and that'll include mode, etc. So that's it. I think that it really transforms the look of the radio. I appreciate that in terms of functionality there isn't very much more than there is on the original display, and there's nothing wrong with the original display. This is just a more pleasant user experience, and I think it's worthwhile just for that, if I'm honest. it just sort of makes it easier to read. And of course, as I explained earlier, adding the Nextion display allows some of the processing tasks that were originally completely based on what was happening in the Arduino inside the radio. The Arduino can now just pass information to this display that can do some of the graphics processing. So that shares the load, which definitely helps. So now we'll take a look inside and see how the modifications were organised. Here's a look inside the back of the µBITX, and that's the front panel here. Mainboard sits on the bottom, and this daughter board here that plugs in down there, this is the Arduino. That's the Arduino Micro, and there's a USB extension that comes out to the back of the case there. And this little bit of strip board here is my additional S meter, which I'll talk about in a while, and that takes its power from the Arduino board and also feeds data into one of the pins on the Arduino. And the only other external connection for that is there's a audio frequency is taken off this connector down here, which is what that sort of orangey coloured wire is. So the modifications have been relatively straightforward, if I'm honest, and I'm very pleased with the result. Okay, let's now remove the Arduino completely and just have a look at what I've done to make the Nextion display fit correctly. Okay, I've removed the front panel from the radio. I've disconnected the controller here from the Arduino. Tempting to think that plugs into there when you first get the radio kit. It doesn't. It actually does plug into the Arduino, so the encoder information goes straight to the computer. It does sort of make sense. So I've completely removed that. What's really nice about the µBITX is that the three front mounted sockets and also the volume control are positioned on the circuit board and line up just nicely with the holes, so it's very easy to take apart. So that's the Arduino sitting there on top of the parent board, if you like, and if I very gently pull up like that, that is how you remove the Arduino. And I'm just going to remove that lead from the fourth pin on there, which is the S meter connection. So there's the Arduino board, and what you've got here essentially is you've got a crystal down there, you've got the synthesizer chip, which is actually quite difficult to see, but is actually just in there with its attendant crystals, etc., and a few components. And the Arduino unit itself, its heart of course is the Arduino controller here, which is plugged into sockets here, and it actually just pulls out, as simple as that. Most of the wiring around here is additional wiring that I've added to facilitate either putting in the Nextion display or the S meter. Now you may find a number of websites which talk about some of the problems when fitting the Nextion display. This is the original display, and as you can see, it looks incredibly similar, and it is incredibly similar, except that the hole spacing is marginally different, and obviously this board is designed to take the old display here with the red back, and so those holes line up exactly with those bolts. Now unfortunately the Nextion display has a slightly wider hole pitch, and I've certainly seen some people, it's easy to get 2 screws in, but it's not possible unmodified to get all the screws in. And my slight concern with that was that when it was attached to the front panel, if you touch the screen this side, you're effectively getting this kind of movement happening like that, which would have eventually have undoubtedly begun to cause a problem. So I had a very careful look, and I don't know how easy it is. I'll put some macro. I'll take some macro photos of this so you can see the detail a bit better. But what I did was the 4 mounting holes have got are through plated, and I've very carefully taken a needle file and I've filed the inner edges of each of those holes such that the Arduino will fit on. And actually, if you can, don't know how well you can see this on here, let's just try and point that out for you. That little copper track there is not concentric with the bolt, and neither is that one. That's the result of me removing very carefully some circuit board on this side, and then I've done the same thing at the other end on the opposite side, which has allowed it to fit rather nicely. And the through hole is still connected on probably about 3/4 of the diameter, so I've not lost anything electrically. And I took a chance on the number of layers on that board. I really haven't had to remove very much material, but I think that's a much better solution than just having 2 screws put in. And the nice thing, of course, is that the pitch of these holes still lines up with the front panel, so we've not had to make any modifications there either. And finally, the last thing I did, I wanted to be able, if I had a problem, to just return this to its original condition. So this here is the original Arduino that came when I bought it, and I've actually just written on in a pen there that it's µBITX original, and I've also got the original display, so it would be incredibly easy to just return that to its original condition if necessary, if I had a problem. I've not had a problem, and I've just got a fairly cheap Arduino Nano clone here running the version 1.2 software very well indeed. And there are 4 connections which are required, and I've actually soldered them here. I actually wrote the colours on of the 4. When you buy a Nextion display, you get this plug and cable with it, and I've attached the 4 connections here, and I will actually show you the connections, because there are a number, because there's so many variations and mods to this. There's some conflicting reports, and when I realised, certainly on one of them, that 2 of these connections appeared to be reversed, and I tried it with the yellow wire on I think it's pin 5, and didn't get a result. No, can't remember now which yellow wire it was on, but eventually I now did this, so we've got the red, green, yellow and blue, and as you've previously seen, the display works very well indeed with that. Just before we look at the details of the S-meter, just a quick reminder of how that works and what the S-meter driver board achieves. You may recall it takes its input from one of the pins on the main board, and its output goes to one of the pins on the Arduino. Now, it's a very straightforward circuit diagram. Again, thanks to KD8CEC for producing all this rather good modification information. And this is the circuit diagram. It's extremely straightforward. Volume audio comes in from the main board into the positive input of the LM386, and the output goes through a diode out to the Arduino on pin 7, and C3, the capacitor on the right there, usually takes some adjustment to give you the kind of results that you want. So what does that board actually do in practicality? Well, first of all, let's just have a quick look at how the signals look. So the yellow trace at the top is the input coming from the main board, and the purple trace lower down is the output from the S-meter driver, and you can see the yellow trace is essentially the audio signal, and the purple trace, the output looks a lot more, for want of a better words, digital. So if I just pause the traces and take some screen grabs, it'll hopefully make a bit more sense. So here's a screen grab, and you can see the yellow trace most definitely is the audio, and the lower trace sort of follows it, but it's a little bit more, I said digital, maybe a little bit more binary, if that makes sense. If we drop some cursors onto the output signal, these are slightly different voltage per division settings here, just for clarity, but we've got a delta there between the two cursors of about 552 millivolts. So there's about 500-ish millivolts of audio coming out of that pin, and coming out of the S-meter driver board, you can see the purple cursors there showing a delta of about 4 volts, slightly over, and that voltage is something which the A7 pin of the Arduino can make better sense of. So that's how the circuit looks in terms of signals and diagram. Let's have a look at how it looks on the actual receiver in practice. On then to the S-meter, and the S-meter circuit board has got the little LM386 on there, couple of capacitors, resistor, and apologies for this enormous polyester capacitor here. That was the only size I had in that voltage, and it's quite a high working voltage, and so it makes it quite a big capacitor. Something of that size would have been adequate, but I hadn't got anything to hand without ordering something, so I just tried that. And getting the capacitance right was actually quite important, because once you've got it actually working and taking its audio drive from the main board here, then what you need to do is set up how the Arduino responds to the information it's getting from this circuit board, and that effectively configures the S-meter on your display. And there is quite a lot of variation, again well beyond the scope of this video, but if you've got the µBITX manager software installed, you can tweak that via the USB port on the Arduino. But it's definitely been a worthwhile addition, and it's just sitting there, takes its power from again from the Arduino board. A lot of people say that this 5-volt regulator isn't up to the job of running a Nextion display and this board, and I did buy a replacement, but currently this doesn't actually get hot to the point that I'd be concerned about it. It does seem to be working okay, but I think some people have had issues with that. So there you go, that's your little daughter board, just built on a bit of strip board, and those are two actually really nice modifications for this radio. That's the display and the S-meter, and the final connection you make is from the S-meter board here. That blue wire feeds into one of the unused Arduino pins, and the Arduino pin then reads the output from this circuit board and translates that into an S-meter display for you. What I really like about the entire radio is that even with the Nextion display back in, there's loads of room in here for you to be able to do other things. You know, you could certainly fit another circuit board in here, and I've got designs on possibly doing that at some point. Right, there you go, those are my µBITX mods. Okay, well I hope that the explanation of the updated display and the S-meter have been helpful and have made some sense. I'm acutely aware that when you look at the wealth of information that there is out there about the µBITX, it can be a bit daunting, potentially even a bit confusing as well, and sometimes feels like it's a little bit contradictory. I don't actually think it is. I just think there's so much information and people are trying very hard to modify and to produce things. It's sometimes a bit of a jungle that you have to wade through. So hopefully I've clarified a couple of things, particularly on the Nextion display and also on the S-meter. I got my Nextion display from Banggood, and I just built the S meter as you've seen on a bit of strip board with some components I'd already got. Neither of these mods are particularly complicated, and they're certainly well within the capabilities of if you're interested in radio, well within your capabilities, so wouldn't be afraid to have a go and do it. It's certainly, for me, improved the radio. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please click the thumbs up. If not, you can click the thumbs down. Either way, thanks very much for watching, and if you can, please consider subscribing. We'll see you on the next one.